Hi and welcome to the Hasty Warhammer channel. Today we're going to go over a little bit how to play the game. We're going to start today with what is it that you're needing, and then show you what that would look like. Then we're going to go into some few episodes that will go through each of the different phases and how to play it. Hasty here is going to be, or Baylor here is going to be with us today and probably help us with the different phases and show you how to play the game. We're very happy to have you with us on our channel, and let's get started. So the first thing you're going to need is the books of Warhammer. There's different kind of books. The main book looks like this. Is the Warhammer Fantasy 8th edition book. You can buy it like this in a hard copy. It also comes in a very skinny version like this that has none of the lore in it, but it has actually, I would say, all the rules that you need, but it's a lot of stuff that you're missing out. A little bit of, in these books it has the painting, and then you can go all out and you can buy a limited edition. It's only about 3,500 that were created, and this is one that was about in the middle of the range. So that's something you can do as well. Don't recommend that for a starter, but that's always, for a collector, it's always fun to find those. You're going to notice with Warhammer there's a lot of stuff going, like the old models that are in metal and a different kind of versions. So when you see me playing some of the older models, it's a lot of metal stuff going on in there as well. But those are the things for the books. And what does the books look like inside? Here is the normal army book. My guess is going to be that this is the book that you are going to buy, most likely. You might start with this smaller book that you have. It still has all the same items in it, but for now, to make it easy, you're going to buy this book. The book contains a very simple way. It's in the beginning, this could be very helpful, like where is all the items, but to be fair, it goes, read the first, I would say, 150 pages. It makes it so much easier if you actually read it, but it will go through the general principles, the basic rules, the movement phase, and then through all the phases. And we'll go through this as well in a little bit more detail, what that would mean, the magic, and then all the way to fighting, and then it goes down here to showing a little bit more. But when you get a little bit further down in the book, it's really just lore, and lore, and a little bit of painting stuff, how to paint your figure. So I highly recommend getting the bigger book, because if you're new to the game, it's very hard to get started painting. But if you look at here and find some of the models you have, or the army book, and that gives you a lot of ideas. The next thing you're going to need, outside the core rules, what you're going to need is, you're going to need an army book. This you don't buy until you figure out what kind of army you're going to have. For instance, as you saw on the table here earlier, it's, the wood elves are up on the table. So I brought, as an example, the wood elves. They have an army book. The army book is comprised of 3 parts. You're going to have a little introduction to the book here. Then you're going to have the lore for each one. Pretty much the whole book comes down to about 15 pages that you need in the whole book, and the rest is just story. But it comes to this point. Here in the book, on this page here on the Wood Elves, page 36, you would have the army special rules. It tells you a little bit about what is the army. The next page will have a little bit of the special weapons that they have. And then it will go through a series of, here are all the different guys that you have. So for instance, here's a tree man, and what would that model look like? This would be the same model, but one that we actually painted. So then you have a little bit of idea what that would look like. After you get down to this is more painting tips that you have as well from the book. And then in the end comes the part that you really need as well. And this is the actual units that you have, and what their strengths and everything are, and we'll explain that when we go into the more detail of the characters and how to play the game. But that's the books that you need. You don't really need any more books than that. The next thing that you're going to need is, somehow you need to know, in the book it talks about spells, so you're going to need some cards. So for instance, in the Wood Elves book, you will have, these are some of the spells that you have for the Wood Elves. You don't have to have these. There is a page, you can cut that up, and in use, but it's a whole lot more fun if you have these cards instead. It's kind of like playing a card game. Then it is easier if you have something like this, because then when you're playing, you can put that out as well on the board, especially some of these spells that stays. The next thing you're going to need, and again this is only if you want to, is all the standard spells that you have, because in the book itself, what you can do is you can either pick your special spells that goes with your army book, or you can take one of the 8 standard ones. Depending on what race you are, it will tell you can have all, you can have some, you can have none, but you'll pick those. So I highly recommend you pick up a stack of these. They're not too expensive. Sometimes they're actually the same price or less than your special army ones, because a lot more people bought these than the army ones, so therefore they're not too pricey to get. Next thing that comes in that you need is dices. This is why most people play the game. They love to roll dice. You can either go with just standard white dice like this. However, most players, when they start with that, scrounge up whatever they have, and then instead they start getting dices that matches their army. And if they have multiple armies, so for instance like we do, this is my Wood Elf dices. They match the army itself, and you can get all kinds of stuff online. But the key is you need to have a 6-sided dice, so a D6, and I would recommend at least 30 of them. Sounds like a lot of dice, but sometimes when you're fighting, it is very fun that you can roll all the dice at once to see what happens. And I've heard many people play. I play the game because I love to roll dice, and it is a lot of roll dice. Another house rule I highly recommend you pick up: don't let the opponent ever touch your dice. It's your dice. Don't let them jinx it. So if they don't have their own dice, give them your old dice so they can have it. For instance, this one, on the table here is the Dark Elves, or the evil race, or depending how you see it, they might not see themselves as evil, but from a Wood Elf standpoint, it is. We use more like a reddish dices because they use a lot of blood and magic, and used it, for instance, on this table. I think I have 3 cauldrons up already on as well, so it kind of matches what they have. Those are the standard dices that you want to have to play the game. However, you also need some very special Warhammer only dices, and they come into 2 flavors. And you have some that are with the numbers, and some that are all directional. So we'll start with the basic ones. These right here that has the numbers, they come in 2 different flavors, or they're same dice, but they have 2 different things. They have numbers that are 2, 4, 6, and 8. They do not have a 10. Instead, they do have a 10, but they don't have the 0, because instead what they have is a misfire. And if you play almost any army, there's a way for you to do something incorrect, and these are used for that. So they are used for that. They are more like the artillery dice. Then you have more like the directional dices. And these directional dices, they either tell you that it's a direct hit, that's what that means, or it has an arrow, that means that you have to go in a certain direction. So if you cast a spell, or if you're shooting like a big catapult or something like that, it's going to tell you to roll an artillery dice and also directional dice. And it all depends on what happens then. And that comes into the next part that I wanted to show. What is it that you need outside of dices? You will take damage at some point. You can use the same dices to remember, or you can have special cards, but what we like to do is have extra dices of different kinds, depending what we use, and then we put that next to the character. So for instance, if this guy has 5 lives, we don't put anything on him, but let's say he takes damage and now he's down to 3 life, then we put a little dice on here, say that he has 3 lives left. Makes it a whole lot easier, because if you try to remember all this, you will never remember it. The other thing you might want to do, he might have a spell on him or anything like that. Let's say he gets 1 more in toughness, and he already has toughness 5, so then let's say he has now toughness 6. You can put another dice on there to showcase that, and then at the same time, you normally, the spell you cast, you probably put that behind the army like this. It's one way to do it, and that's why it's also very fun to have these dices. If we then look at the next part that you need, is that with the game, you might need also a few different ways to showcase how far is the damage taken. So let's say I have a spellcaster and he does a like a firestorm or a breath weapon is what it calls in this game. It's like a breath weapon kind of thing. Every model that's underneath here that will be touched, they will then get hurt. So what you would normally do, you would take, like for instance here, this little wood elf army. I put them over here as an example. Then I have some kind of wizard and they lay this on. You roll your dice and then you go underneath here and you try to find what is it that is underneath that, how many is touched. And then they have in the book on that spell, it has then a special kind of rule for that on how that works. This comes in different flavors. You have the breath weapon. Then you have this where the smaller circle is for a small round base, and then you have the larger one. You can go with these fancy ones and they look really fun, but they're just not worth playing with. They are much too hard to figure out exactly which touches. So then you can come with maybe something like that. It's like a green one. Or what I prefer, it doesn't look so nice, but have something instead that is as simple as possible that you can just see right through it. So I will highly recommend maybe have some of these other fun ones, but when it comes down to it, you're most likely going to have something you can very easily see through, because you and your opponent is going to stand here and argue, is that millimeter touching that base down there or not? So to solve that comes the next part. We'll talk about that here. Is the movement trace. Imagine if you have to take all of these guys and one at a one. You're going to move up 3 inches, so you're going to move over here and you have to take each one at a time and move. You will sit here all day and just moving figures and you will be so bored. Instead, what we have is something called a movement trace. You can easily then just move the whole thing over. Remember, a movement trace doesn't count, it's the figures inside, so make sure you decide when you play where is the real square of all your dudes, and then after that, that will be the one that you measure from. So if they sometimes move around a little bit, you know that this is the corner that we always go by, and then everything gets pushed to that side to have it. What does movement trace look like? You see the one that has right here. It's a big square to have enough of them in it. What you can also do is you can have a different kind of movement trace. You saw one size already. Here is one, for instance, that is good for horses. They line up like this. You have another one here that is good for smaller bases. Again, that's for this kind of type base. And you have a lot of them, so you have rows going this way. You might have a little bit bigger size. This one is done for a little bit bigger characters. I don't have those out here right now, but like for instance the orc and goblins, this is perfect for the orcs because they have a little bit bigger base than these right here, the 20 ones. They're actually a little bit bigger, so you can fit in a row. What you can also have on here is like trolls and other things with a big base. Then you have another one that is this kind of type. This is normal. We have 2 rows of armies, but or like horses and stuff, or you have a little bit larger size that goes across. And then this is a standard. It's a massive. When you have a very large troop, you have something like this as well that you can have. And it comes in 2 different sizes. This is a very large one, but you can get a little bit smaller. They only have 40 characters in. This one you can fit about 60 in. What we think is very smart to have as well is bases like this. It's something that you can easily, where it has a magnet on the bottom and on top, so when you snap your characters on, so they just go on there by itself, and then you can move it around and you don't have to worry about it. The other thing I like about this base and why I brought it up is that if you see these squares right here, it's very hard when you're playing and then someone starts arguing about, yeah, but we're not, these guys, where is it touching? You know what I like to do is to do this. Go over to the side where you have one of these and then say, okay, I'm shooting here, and what does that really do? And then you can really see that these are the ones that are all touching. So you kind of line it up with what you had over here, and then you can see it. And most of the times you're going to realize that it touches a whole lot more than you're trying to see from the top. So this is a great way to do it. So I recommend having one that is for the smaller base and one that is for the larger base. Another thing you can do as well, if you don't have the money to buy these, because a lot of these other things you buy from different stores, and it's not actually Games Workshop, it's from other places. You can also 3D print them. So I have my own 3D printer, so I can print these bases. What I found though that I really liked about these that I just printed is that they have a little lid on it. So instead of doing the whole magnet stuff that we had before, now you don't have to worry about putting magnets on the bottom of the characters and this, and when you lift them up, they're not going to fall. And then you might think, yeah, but it doesn't matter really that you have one of these because they're so small. But if you, for instance, start playing with the special characters like this one, just touching the table would make him fall, and now instead I can move this around, and even though I'm pretty shaky, nothing happens, it doesn't fall over. So it's a good way to do it. Just remember that these little things are 2 or 0.5 millimeter, so it will make your unit not perfect, but if the opponent is okay with that, this is a good solution for that. The next thing that you will need, or I recommend you using, is some way to see directional faces. This little thing here has saved our lives so many times, because a lot of times in Warhammer, you're going to have an army like this, but they're, let's say they're this direction. Imagine this is, 25 of them. And you're going to say, am I within the charge range or something else? You always stick it on here, and then you can see with that arrow, which side I'm on. Am I on the left side, right side? Am I within the right 45 angle? Some people I've seen it get really fancy would have a laser pointer. We don't use that, but we use this. But if you really want to get technical, that might be even better to do it. Another way to do it is to take something very hard, take base to base from this, and then you can see the 45-degree angle, and then you can also do it that way. So it's a good way to do it too. Also, since these bases are exactly the same square, just go from one corner to the catty corner, and that will tell you which direction you are. The next thing you will need is going to be a ruler. This is done by a company that put everything in inches. So if you're not familiar with the inches and feet and those kind of things, and you're a metric kind of guy, no worries. You just make sure you buy one of these tape measures. Almost all of them have the inches and the metric system. So you have the centimeters on the bottom and the inches. Almost everything in Warhammer is either 3, 4, 5, or 6 inches for movement. There's a few differences in there as well, but those are the main ones. So I see a lot of people just get a measurement that's only 6. I recommend not getting that. In that case, have 2 of them. So you have one, because sometimes you want to shoot artillery and stuff, and it makes it really complicated if you're trying to combine them all. So have something that's good. Also get something that locks like this. Otherwise, you're going to ruin lots of your models. So that is the next thing that you need. Do you need one of these to roll your dice in? I mean, some people think this is fun to roll it and then roll it out. Other people like to use it with a hand. You do not need a dice roller, but it's something that you might want. However, what you really need though is when you see someone that has done like mine, where it's a professional painted one, that we're taking, hundreds of hours to create. You want to get your biggest dice that you have, and then what you want to do is when they're playing, and let's say, you're trying to roll for something, you make sure you take all your biggest dice and roll right across on them. And that is very appreciated in Warhammer. It does not say in the rules anywhere that you cannot do this. So if you want to win the tournament automatically, you bring, instead of wooden one, you bring metal ones with some pegs on it, to really make sure that when you roll over the figures, you flatten them to the ground. So if you do play only by the rules, then you can always, miscalculate what the rules say. But these are highly recommended. So 30 to 40 of these, roll every time. Make sure you don't roll on your side to ruin your figures. Always roll it to the opponent's side. The next thing you're going to need is figures. You have to decide on what army you want. We've seen here a little bit the Wood Elf army, but I'll throw this back out here. You just need figures, and the way this works is I highly recommend you, since this is now an older version, you can't buy the boxes new. If you do, you have to buy it from people like us that have boxes at home that we haven't created yet. So it's actually cheaper to just buy them finished. Find whichever army that you want, buy a few of those, and just start playing. I would not recommend you doing hundreds of hours of research to figure out what armor it is, because literally if you buy it from the average price, you can just, if you decide that's not the armor you want, you just go back out to the same place that you bought it from and sell it again. The only thing that you lost if you sell it the next day, and if you get the average price, is really just the shipping and handling from both sides. That's it. So this is not very expensive now to play this game because of that, because you can always sell what you have, and people are always going to want this game. This is just one of those, I think they made the perfect game already, and they've been trying other games. I think a lot of people are going to be playing this for a long time. The other things you're going to need as well, I'll take this away so you can see, is a mat and a table. The table needs to be 6 by 4 feet. If you're not familiar with feet, just use your ruler, but it's pretty much a couple of meters by 2 meters. Give or take, it's not exactly like that, but it's 6 feet by 4 feet. Very important that you have the right size table, because everything is set up to be around that, the rules, the charging, everything, to make it easy. The other thing we recommend is to have maybe some mats. These are actually just mouse pads, but humongous mouse pads. You can buy these online, or you can just use a tablecloth or anything else. We have several of these because I think it's fun to change. So I'm a little nerdy that way and like to buy a lot of stuff for Warhammer that is unnecessary, but it makes it a lot better. Just make sure whatever you have is something that you can very easily scoot stuff on. You want to make sure that this right here, you don't get stuck everywhere or it's very loud. So you want something that is very smooth. That's why these mouse pads are great, because everything you do is so smooth. You can move it easily. Because if you don't, then you suddenly, now these are kind of stuck on here, but if you had a normal one to give you a heads up and show you for real, if you start moving these around, they start flying all over the place. But if you have something smooth like this, they will never move. So that's something that you want to get going with. And the last thing is one of the parts that are really fun as well is the terrain. Hey Baylor, what you doing? Did you take something from the table? You can have, for instance, there's all different kind of terrains. I won't go through with this, but you can have buildings like this, where you can also open up the inside from the building. And the sides and stuff like this you can have. This is what it would look like. And then when you're playing, because you can put models in, you can, for instance, have something like this inside the building, and now you have something to shoot from the building. Not everyone plays with buildings that you can go into, but we like to play with that sometimes, so it's fun to have. Other terrains are, for instance, you can have something on the ground like this, and this gives a cover, so it's very fun to have something with cover. Other things are, for instance, trees that helps you to it gives you negative things that are happening as well. And then, or you could have a little terrain pieces like this, for instance, like some stones and stuff that is around. One of the things I highly recommend you getting, if you don't have it, is getting hills, because it's really fun to have on the table as well. Then you can have lakes, you can have all kinds of stuff as well. So different kind of houses and stuff that you have. You can also have ruins and everything else. You know, the sky is the limit. You can even make your own terrain as well. We use all kinds of stuff here at the place that we like. We created some ourselves, some we bought, and there's a lot of stuff too. Like if you play D&D and other role-playing games, the same thing that you buy for Warhammer to use on this, you can also use in your campaigns and stuff. So I highly recommend, use them both. There's nothing that says you cannot use just game workshops, even though in their book that's what they're saying. And this is not what we play. I think we should. It's a fun game. They don't even create the game anymore. This is all about having fun. So that's probably as much as I would like to say about what is it you need to get started. And next, we're going to dive straight into how to play the game. Thank you for watching the episode today, and I hope you learned something, and I hope also you got inspired to either come back and start playing the game again if you did that when you were younger, or if this is your first time, I hope you enjoyed seeing what you need. The next episodes are for you. to actually show you how to play the game as well. And from myself and Baylor, I hope you have a wonderful day, and it's a huge community out there playing Warhammer. When you start this game, you're going to find out very quickly that people are going to come out of the woodworks and say that they either play this game or they would love to start playing it. So go out there, enjoy it, and I hope you have a wonderful time. Until next time, bye-bye.
That's a good boy. What do you say? Shall we do a treat? Let's do a treat. Let's do a treat.
1, 2, 3, go.